Hello, I'm Thomas Hoehne, and this is number 0808, the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder, and it comes to you right now.
The following program is brought to you in living color.
Now, it's time for an eclectic mix of interviews and some of the oddest news stories you'll ever hear. It's the Stuph File Program with Peter Anthony Holder.
Hey there, hi there, ho there! Peter Anthony Holder here with you, and yes, this is indeed another edition of the Stuph File Program, number 0808. And coming up on this edition of the Stuph File Program, Dan Meyer and Marc Hartzman are the co-authors of To the Hilt, a sword swallower's history of sword swallowing. How did these guys meet?
Marc and I met 2001 or 2002 at the Sideshow Gathering and Sword Swallowers Convention in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And then we've been friends ever since then. We connect up at Ripley's in different locations around the country. Where was it that we met up once, Marc? Was it Connecticut?
Yeah, the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, where you were doing a lecture on Edith Clifford's sword collection that you own. It was on display there in an exhibit. And I was writing a story then for AOL Weird News about it. Brought my daughters with me, and we wrote a story about you in your lecture then. So that was a lot of fun.
Bonnie Garvin is the creator of Storytelling Lab. She teaches people not how to write, but rather the art of storytelling.
I really believe that everybody has a writer in them. It's only a question of how do you access it. So using a multifaceted approach and multimedia approach to classes, I then work with, every week you tap into a different aspect of your voice. So one time you might do something through music. One time you might do something that's telling a story graphically. Some other time you may be telling a story extemporaneously. So that you're really exercising muscles that are there, but you just haven't used before.
Luce Sutherland is the author of the erotic novel Delicious Surrender. It's her debut novel. How did she get into this genre?
Even before 50 Shades of Grey hit the scene, I was reading novels of this variety, discovered them in my late 20s, started out with simple vanilla stuff, and then found progressively juicy books throughout my younger years. It was only 5 years ago when I was presented with an opportunity to write my own. COVID gave me a perfect opportunity, a lot of isolation and time by myself to dive right in.
And there's lots and lots of Stuph File news, dad joke theater, morning shower thoughts, and an idiot of the day. The guest later, the person who told you this was show number 0808, was Thomas Hoehne, who is an electrician and also a regular Stuph File Program listener. Thank you very much, Thomas, for doing the guest slate on this edition of the Stuph File Program, a show that is listener-supported, fan-funded radio that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Well, let's get right to the stuff. In Wales, 25-year-old Rhiannon Evans was convicted of taking fart selfies and sending them to her boyfriend's ex. Prosecutors claim the woman would pass gas by placing the camera on her bottom and then, passing the gas. She then sent these videos via WhatsApp to her rival in love.
Fart in your general direction.
Police warned Evans to stop this cheeky behavior, but she continued to send these harassing messages. Evans confessed and was given a 12-month community order, said defender Harriet Gorst. At the time she sent these videos, she had some drinks and then sent them, understanding now this has caused the victim some distress. Wow. Fines and sentenced a year of community service. For Evans, the price of gas just went up. The Palm Beach County, Florida Sheriff's Office was called to the Boca Lago Country Club on a report of an unruly guest at a wedding held there. 52-year-old Marc Roher became upset when he thought a pair of little girls cut in front of him in line for the prime rib carving station buffet. The unnamed father of the girls tried to de-escalate the situation by stepping away, But Rohrer, an attorney in nearby Pembroke Pines, allegedly grabbed the man by the collar, smashed his dinner plate over the man's head, and shoved him away. Rohrer allegedly admitted he started the scuffle and was apparently charged with aggravated battery with a deadly weapon. Don't laugh. Dinner plates can be deadly, admittedly less deadly than the knives at the prime rib carving station, but deadly nonetheless. And while we're still with food fights, a 19-year-old Wingstop manager is facing felony charges after she doused 2 customers with hot grease and ranch dressing during a confrontation.
At Wingstop, we don't just make wings. We make wings worth obsessing over.
According to investigators, the victims tangled with Carnale Irene, the Wingstop worker inside a Port St. Lucie, Florida outpost of the chicken wing restaurant. Irene told police that the customers, one of whom is a minor, were loud and disruptive and caused a disturbance. During the dispute, one of the patrons pushed a container of straws off the counter.
We don't start till you say go.
The conflict escalated when Irene responded by throwing ranch dressing at the victims. She then went into the kitchen and returned with a bucket of hot grease and threw the liquid at the victims. Store security footage reviewed by police showed an individual trying to hold Irene back, but she pushes forward and throws the liquid in the bucket. Cops say Irene admitted to spraying ranch dressing on the customers and justified her actions by stating the customers were being verbally abusive and had reached over the counter to knock over the straws. Meanwhile, the hot oil recipients complained that the liquid burned upon impact and resulted in shiny, burnt skin. A crime scene investigator photographed their injuries. When cops arrived at Wingstop, the eatery's floor was greasy and slippery, and it appeared that workers attempted to clean the oil that was all over the floor. Irene was arrested and charged with aggravated battery and aggravated child abuse, both felonies. Boy, if she goes to jail, they might get a culinary superstar in the prison kitchen.
Wingstop, the wing experts.
And let's get to our first guests here on this edition of the Stuph File Program. We've had sword swallower Dan Meyer both on our old show and the Stuph File Program several times, but not recently. The last time he was on was in 2016. But Dan has a new book out that he co-wrote with someone that you do hear very often on this show. In fact, Marc Hartzman, the curator of WeirdHistorian.com, is on regularly with the Weird Story of the Month. Well, together they have written a book called To the Hilt, a sword swallower's history of sword swallowing. They both join us via Zoom. Hi, guys.
Hey, Peter.
Hi, Peter.
Thanks for being on the program with us. And first of all, off the bat, I'm glad you've titled the book To the Hilt, because no one knows what that means, and they don't know what hilt means. I do. But now, it truly does apply to this book.
Oh, it does. 100%. To the hilt. That's how we do it.
Absolutely. First of all, how did you guys get together?
Marc and I met, it must have been 2001 or 2002 at the Sideshow Gathering and Sword Swallowers Convention in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. And then we've been friends ever since then. We connect up at Ripley's in different locations around the country. Where was it that we met up once, Marc? Was it Connecticut?
The Greenwich Museum, or the Bruce Museum in Greenwich, where you were doing a lecture on Edith Clifford's sword collection that you own. It was on display there in an exhibit, a circus exhibit it had. And I was writing a story then for AOL Weird News about it. Brought my daughters with me, and we wrote a story about you in your lecture then. So that was a lot of fun.
And I swallowed her saw that was 110 years old that she had swallowed in 1910. I swallowed it, and you took a photo of it that ended up becoming a Ripley's Believe It or Not cartoon. So it was a memorable day for me.
So, I think my headline, I think, was Man Swallows 100-Year-Old Museum Exhibit.
Yes.
So how did you guys get together and decide that you were going to write a book?
When in 1997, when I first started researching sword swallowing, I met up with a giant named George the Giant. I asked him about sword swallowing. He said, I'll give you 2 tips. Number 1, it's extremely dangerous. 29 people have died doing it. Number 2, don't try it. Well, that didn't dissuade me. It made me really want to find those, he said there were less than a dozen sword swallowers left in the world today. So I set about to hunt them down and find every tidbit of information about sword swallowing and make it an obsession to learn how to swallow a sword. In doing so, I found there weren't very many books. And as I would collect the research, I put it together into the Sword Swallowers Hall of Fame, which became Sword Swallowers Association International, swordswallow.com, and swordswallow.org. And I realized I had enough material here for a beautiful history book. And I knew that Marc was a great writer. So I reached out to him about 7 years ago. I said, hey, man, you want to take some of these stories and help me repolish them and put them into a book? And he said, sure. And we kind of worked on it, and we've been doing it ever since.
From your point of view, Marc, this is something that's right up your alley.
Yeah, I mean, I always have loved Sideshow. I wrote American Sideshow back in 2005, and lots of articles about sideshow performers, and all of my interest in sideshow has kind of branched out into the other odd topics that I've written about and that you and I speak about every month. So it all kind of comes from the sideshow root. So it's been really great getting back to it. In fact, a lot of the sword swallowers we spoke to were people I'd interviewed and met when I wrote American Sideshow. So it was kind of nice reconnecting. The book has biographies of more than 80 historical sword swallowers and tons of amazing old photographs of ephemera. And then as well as that, we also have stories. It's a section we call Cutting Up Jackpots, which is carny or sideshow lingo for, swapping stories, basically. So we spoke to a lot of the modern day sword swallowers to get their really remarkable stories and adventures in swallowing swords, whether it was how they learned or, weird things that happened, injuries along the way, just any kind of bizarre, amazing story that they would share with us. So that's sort of the back half of the book is the modern day sword swallowers.
Well, Dan, speaking of injuries, you said earlier that when you talked to George that he said, don't do it, don't try it. So was there any trepidation in putting this in print for, for
yes.
young hands to see?
Good question.
Yes, actually, that is a very good question. We were very careful that the book is not a how-to book. It describes the stories of people, their lives, their injuries, their deaths, their adventures, but it's not a step-by-step how-to. Although it does give an awful lot of information that I wish I would have had in 1997 when I started. So no, it's not a how-to book. We are very, very careful to not give away too many of and there aren't really any secrets. It's just, it takes most people, it took me 14,000 unsuccessful attempts. I practiced 10 to 12 times a day, every day for 4 years, about 14,000 unsuccessful attempts. I had a student I mentored for 10 years, and he still can't get a sword down to this day. But it takes most people 3 to 5 years, some 5 to 10 years to learn how to swallow a sword. So for all of your listeners, do not try this at home.
Well, when I hear...
We actually have, if I could just add really quick,
Yep.
We actually have a real doctor's warning in the book to not try this at home.
Well,
yes.
And in multiple places in the book, we repeat that message.
Well, Dan, when I hear you say unsuccessful attempts, to me, that cannot go good. I mean, what for you is an unsuccessful attempt at swallowing a sword?
For most people, it's several months to several years of just hitting the back of the throat, hitting the gag reflex, and learning to overcome the gag reflex. I still have a gag reflex, but I've learned to overcome it and repress it. Then you have to find the proper alignment down into the epiglottis and find the opening into the epiglottis. You flip open the epiglottis, slide the blade down the esophagus, repress the peristalsis reflex, 22 pairs of muscles that swallows your food down into your stomach, slide it down into the chest area between the lungs. When you get to the center of the chest, you actually have to nudge the heart to the left, slide through the lower esophageal sphincter, past the liver and kidneys, down into the stomach, all the way down to the duodenum or the duodenum, the bottom of the stomach. Piece of cake. If I were to go further than that, all the way down to my fallopian tubes.
Wow, there is no navigation system for that on Google. I'm just curious. I'm just curious, Dan. When you go to a doctor for the first time and they say, and what is it you do? What's their reaction?
A lot of times I don't tell them unless I'm getting an x-ray done, and then I'll bring a sword along and go, oh, by the way, while we're in here, do you mind doing an x-ray for me? And I've probably got 40 or 50 x-rays with the sword in place. It's really pretty neat. They're fascinated. I've used many doctors in documentaries on History Channel, Stanley's Superhumans, Discovery Channel, Learning Channel. I bring my doctor friends on, and they verify that, yes, this is really real and really dangerous.
Yeah, those x-rays are a great way to help prove that sword swallowing is real, because that's certainly something that comes up for Dan and really every sword swallower, I believe, especially a lot of them through history, had to deal with, people in the audience not thinking it was a real act or a real stunt.
Well, Marc, again, you're the curator of WeirdHistorian.com. You bring up weird stories all the time, but a lot of the times when you talk about those stories, you're talking about a historical situation where the people are long dead in most cases of the stories that you are doing the research on. But here it is, you're doing a book with the Dan Meyer, the guy who was on several iterations of America's Got Talent across the world, and you're working with him. What did you learn that was surprising to you just by being in Dan's orbit?
Well, part of it's everything he was just describing, that the complexity of swallowing a sword. It isn't just suppressing the gag reflex and getting it down. There's a lot that goes into it. Everything he mentioned just sort of highlights the danger that's involved, which I think is really important for people to understand and to appreciate what people are doing for their entertainment. So I think it's great working with Dan, because he knows things that just very few humans know, right? His experiences, his perspectives. And so that gives the book something really that no other book has. It's nothing I could have achieved on my own, because it's not something I've ever done, and I don't want to do it. So I'll add that, no desire. But Dan's able to bring this real perspective that no one else can really bring, in this knowledge. So that was really, I think, a huge bonus to the book, and that's why the subtitle is a sword swallower's history of sword swallowing, because it's coming from Dan's perspectives and the research that he started 25 years ago, and then all the connections he has. We were able to speak with a lot of relatives of deceased sword swallowers, as well as we just spoke again actually with the world's oldest living sword swallower, who's about to turn 90 and still swallowing swords. I'll add 77 years worth of swallowing swords. So between his knowledge, his perspectives, and connections, I think we really put together something pretty special and unique, and there's really no other book like it.
Well, we just got about a minute, but I've got to ask, Dan, when you first started doing this, and you were hell-bent on becoming the sword swallower that you are, the premier sword swallower that you are, what did your friends and family say when you first got into this?
I didn't tell my parents. My mom was a registered nurse. My dad was an x-ray technician. I did not tell them during the 4 years that I was practicing. And then after I got a sword down the first time, I could get a piece of metal down. It took about 2 seconds, but it took me about 5 years to put a good show together and be able to tour. And now it's taken me to 60 countries around the world. But most people find it very fascinating. And in the first few years, I talked about it at length, way, way too much. Now I've learned to kind of bite my tongue. And when I'm flying on a plane, somebody says, what do you do? I say, well, I work in steel. And that's about it. But now I can tell them I'm an author of the book, To the Hilt, A Sword Swallower's History of Sword Swallowing. And that makes it a little bit more interesting.
And in hindsight, as your career took a hold, did your parents say, well, yeah, that's Dan?
Yeah, I got called back to Waldorf College I got the alumni, distinguished alumni award there. And I did a command, sold out performance for all the staff, the president of the school and everything. And my mom and dad were there. A lot of my past classmates and friends I'd traveled in India with, where I first saw sword swallowing, were there. And my dad came up to me with tears in his eyes and he said, now I get what you do. It's not about the swords. It's about helping people find their purpose and calling. And he got it. And then it made me proud. Dad just died last month at 94. And I'm just glad that he understood what my purpose and calling was. And now I'm trying to reach more people with the book, To the Hilt.
Did your dad get a chance to see the book before it was published?
No, he did not. He saw the cover, and that was it. So I'm disappointed in that, but I'm glad it's out there for other people to see and other people to read.
Well, congratulations on the book. The book is called To the Hilt, A Sword Swallower's History of Sword Swallowing. written by Dan Meyer and, of course, Marc Hartzman. Guys, thank you very, very much for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thanks for
so
having
much,
me,
Peter. Great to be here.
Dan Meyer and Marc Hartzman, authors of To the Hilt, A Sword Swallower's History of Sword Swallowing. You can go to our website at thestuffile.com, check out the show number for this program, which is show number 0808, and you'll find the links to Dan's and Marc's sites, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order their book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
And now, Dad Joke Theater.
Do you know what has 4 wheels and flies? A garbage truck.
Join us again for another Stuff File program, Dad Joke Theater.
There's still more guests, more news, and an idiot of the day coming your way on the Stuff File program. Stay tuned. The Stuff File program is a listener-supported, fan-funded radio show that depends on you for our success. Join us at patreon.com to help make this show an even bigger and better radio experience. Sign up and find out about our rewards program. Being a patron doesn't have to be a long-term commitment. There's absolutely no obligation. You could join today and end whenever you'd like. But the time we have your support would be so greatly appreciated. We'd also love to hear your thoughts about the show and even your ideas for rewards. Join us for the ride. Join us at patreon.com/The Stuff File program. Available on Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and just about every other way you stream audio. This is the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's radio that's everywhere you want to be, and some places you don't.
And still to come on the program, we have Bonnie Garvin, creator of Storytelling Lab. Also, Luce Sutherland, who is the author of the erotic novel Delicious Surrender. We also have an idiot of the day coming your way, and morning shower thoughts, and of course, more Stuff File news right here, right now. A Florida woman, Sabrina Coyne, has been accused of throwing a commemorative first date brick through her ex-husband's window. Lee County Sheriff deputies say surveillance footage shows Coyne throwing the object while recording the act with a phone in her other hand. The brick is engraved in memory of the couple's first date in June of 2020. Coyne is now being charged with criminal mischief and throwing a deadly missile into an occupied dwelling. Okay, I know hindsight is always 20/20, but was it ever a good idea to have a commemorative first date brick? I don't think so. And still with romance, does Valentine's Day remind you of your ex? A Muskegon, Michigan animal shelter will help scorned lovers soothe their wounds by letting you, quote, neuter your ex, unquote. Those who donate $25 to Heaven Can Wait Animal Haven will have a feral cat named after their ex who will then be fixed. The shelter's trap, neuter, return program will snip the animal and return them to their colony. Cats will be named in the order they're given, so your ex's namesake may be fixed sometime in the next few months. Well, if those cats are looking for revenge, they'll know the name of the person responsible. Michael Schurer of Winter Garden, Florida, was fired by Walt Disney World when he worked in the department that printed menus for park restaurants. Months later, the FBI raided his home. Someone was altering the restaurant menus by logging in remotely to change pricing, remove allergen information, which could result in a diner becoming ill or dying, and in one case, adding a swastika.
We fooled him. Oh, yeah?
Some of the changed menus were printed but caught before being distributed. After first claiming he was being framed by Disney, Schurer pleaded guilty to the charges, which call for up to 10 years in prison. Sentencing has not yet been scheduled. I guess the judge needs time to peruse the menu of punishment options. In any case, I'm sure is going to get his just desserts. A man who spent thousands creating a border collie costume to live in is now opening a zoo for other humans who dress as animals. Taco the Collie currently has 72,000 subscribers on YouTube who watch him do tricks and interact with other dogs. And please, take a moment to let that sink in. He has 72,000 subscribers. Yeah. Now he wants to create a space for others like him. The center will be called Taco Zoo and will let dog lovers live out their dreams of becoming canines. The official website reads, "Have you ever wanted to be an animal? We offer a service that can help make that wish come true, even if only a little, by having you wear a costume." The zoo one day hopes to include other animal costumes like pandas. Again, these are for people who have more dollars than cents. And finally, in this section of Stuff File News, before we get to our next guest here on this edition of the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder, still with pseudo dogs, kinda, a Florida Highway Patrol trooper spotted a speeding pickup truck which was also swerving all over the road. He tried to pull the vehicle over, but the driver, 36-year-old Dylan Keith Devereaux, sped away, then stopped and dropped off a passenger before continuing his flight. Devereaux eventually crashed and took off on foot, but was stopped when the trooper tased him. As the trooper tried to take him into custody, Devereaux, who was dressed in a Dalmatian onesie, fought the trooper off, was tased again, and still managed to run away with the trooper's handcuffs attached to one wrist.
What a charming dog. Thank you. Spots? Yes, Dalmatian.
By then, backups had arrived and went to Devereaux's nearby house. Devereaux's girlfriend refused troopers entry because she had drugs inside and didn't want to go to jail. Apparently, by then, the troopers were already inside and arrested Devereaux on multiple charges, including alleged possession of meth and other drugs, resisting arrest, and depriving an officer of equipment, the handcuffs, which were not found. They also arrested the girlfriend, 31-year-old Megan Elizabeth Hamilton. I don't know what the Dalmatian onesie is all about, but the joke's on them. And let's get to our next guest here in this edition of the Stuff File program. Bonnie Garvin is an award-winning writer, playwright, and author who also teaches the profession. In fact, she says she can turn you into a writer, too. She offers up courses via Zoom in a project called Storytelling Lab. She joins us via Zoom from Los Angeles. Hi, Bonnie.
Hi. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on the program. So how does Storytelling Lab work, and how did you start it?
Well, I started it during COVID because, obviously I, like everybody else, was locked in my house. And although I was teaching my classes, my screenwriting classes at USC, it was really a nightmare because they were all, young people, and they were locked in their house, a lot of them with their parents. And it was just not a good thing. So I thought, well, if I'm going to continue to love teaching, I got to find some other way. And I thought, well, I'll work with adults. And I came up with this kind of idea that, because I thought it would only be 6 weeks that we'd be locked up. And I thought a 6-week class, I would just do 6 people so I could really, connect with people. Because normally I have classes, at the university that are 14 people. And I wanted to do it where, because I don't really believe in teaching writing. I mean, if you're not literate as an adult, you need to go back to school. I'm not going to teach you that. So I really believe that everybody has a writer in them. It's only a question of how do you access it. So using a sort of a multifaceted approach and multimedia approach to classes, I then work with every week you tap into a different aspect of your voice. So one time you might do something through music. One time you might do something that's telling a story graphically. Some other time you may be telling a story extemporaneously, so that you're really exercising muscles that are there, but you just haven't used before. I mean, for example, I had a woman who had been trying for a long time to write a memoir on grief because she had some really sad, horrible things that happened to her. And she ended up, because one of the assignments was dealing with showing her people graphic novels, she ended up writing a graphic novel on grief, doing all the illustrations herself, and it was featured in the Sunday Times of London magazine. This is
Wow.
someone that had never done anything like that before. So it isn't me. That's doing that. It's just me facilitating it in the sense of I get you out of your way so that you can be fully engaged in whatever it is you want to be doing, or fully engaged in creating some new aspect of yourself that's really there, but you just never tapped into it, because we all walk around kind of deciding, okay, I can do that. No, I can't do that. I can't do that. Well, maybe I could do that. But you don't say, hey, let's see what happens. You don't know what you can do until you try it.
Speaking of trying it, I mean, you have been teaching for a while, but because of COVID, you went to this storytelling lab situation. How has that changed you as a teacher?
Well, number one, it's changed me because I feel much more empowered teaching adults in this format than I do students in a university situation, because I have to adapt to their rules, not the student rules, the university's rules, and there are many. But in my private classes, and also because they're adults, what ends up happening is I get people who all, like me, were creative as kids, and then at some point you go, oh, I have to earn a living, and you push that all aside and you go out and earn a living. And one day you wake up and you go, oh my God, is that all there is? And that's what happened to people during COVID. And so what I really do is I tap into that, because your creativity that you had when you were 7 and your fearlessness is all there. It's just buried under all this bullshit and insecurity and all the other stuff that comes along with being an adult. So what I do is I reconnect you. Storytelling Lab really reconnects you to your natural inner child. It's there. So I think that the techniques that I've created for people really open them up and allow them to sort of connect with that.
Well, what's your backstory? Because you say, you have to release your inner child. At what point did you do that for yourself?
I did it by accident. And that's why I always know everyone can write, because I can write. And so I was someone, I was sort of like a quasi-juvenile delinquent growing up, had zero ambition. Then I went to college because, I had to do that because my parents wanted me to do that. And then when I got out, I had no idea what I wanted to do. And it took me a very long time to find it. And at one point when I was in therapy, I decided that although I had finished school with a degree in teaching, I didn't really want to do that, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went back and started taking classes randomly. And just if they sounded interesting. And this class that I thought I was entering, that was a journalism class, turned out to be an advanced playwriting class. And the professor convinced me to stay. I literally, if you gave me a list of 1,000 things and put on that list, probably 1,001 would have been writings. Never occurred to me. But that was the good part about it, because I didn't have any ambition or desire or any of the kind of things that we bring to it as we get older. I thought, what the hell? I know how to talk. I listen to people. I sort of exist in the world. I'm sure I could make up something. It just didn't seem like that daunting of a task, really, in a funny way. And that's how I got started, because I wrote this play. The play ended up being a finalist for a really prestigious national award. And suddenly I went, oh, I'm going to be a writer. So it literally happened like that. And I think that it really is a good example, and why I use myself as an example, because I never thought about it. And as I say, had I thought about it, I would have never done it, because I would have immediately dismissed it. So what I really learned is to sort of tap into that voice that's in all of us, that we had when we were kids, when you just made up stuff. You'd make up these fantastic little stories, right?
So when you started, you didn't know what you didn't know. So
exactly. Thank you. That's exactly right.
Do you feel that part of our problem, generally speaking, is the fact that we tend to get in our own way.
Absolutely. And that's the whole point of the class, is to show you how to get out of your own way, because we really are our worst enemies. And the other problem is, when you're overthinking and you're that self-focused, you can't be creative. I mean, you really have to find a way to put all of that stuff aside. So like when I sit here and I work as a writer, or I'm also a painter, I don't think about all that stuff. I kind of go into, I don't want to say a trance, I don't know what it is, but you kind of go to a different place, but you've got to turn off the voices in your head so that you can get to that place. All the ones that are saying, why are you doing that? You're wasting your time. Oh, you think anyone's going to buy anything from you? Why would anyone want to read you anyway? There's so many better, all that stuff that just goes on constantly.
Everyone, as you say, has a book in them. Everyone, that old adage, everyone has a book in them. So how does one transform reality into fiction if you're not doing a memoir, for instance?
Well, that's a really complicated question, because that really goes into understanding the elements of, what makes a good story. So, for example, like I do my 6-week storytelling class, and that's all about sort of loosening you up and getting you to tell, like how to tell a story and what format to tell it in. Because there are lots of different things, right? There are movies, there's film, there's theater, there's music. I mean, there's a whole, what fits graphic novels? I mean, what fits you and what you want to accomplish? So that's one big aspect of it. And then I have a storytelling lab part 2, where if you were, let's say that it was you and you came in and you went, okay, I'm going to write this novel. Now, where do I start? That's over a 12-week period. Every week, you learn a different aspect of crafting a story. So, and until you sort of know, I think those kind of the fundamentals, it really is hard to write. I mean, you can do it, and I would encourage people to do it. But, at some point, you've got to know what you're doing, and that really has to do with less about talent and ability and more about just understanding the elements of good storytelling.
Now, you mentioned the various vehicles that one can write in, but there's also the various genres that you can write in. Just because you have a story doesn't necessarily mean that it could be a comedy or a drama or a tragedy. It could be any of those things based on the story you're telling and the way you're writing it.
Yes, and what are you trying to get across? Because if you're doing a satire, that's very different in terms of what you're trying to communicate if you're doing the same thing as a drama, right? So you've got to know what it is you're trying to communicate. Okay, I want people to think, I'm just going to make something up. I'm telling a story about how if you don't follow your passion in life, you'll shortchange yourself. Okay, that's my story. Or I wanted to have a story about, I want to show ultimately how all people are equal. There are no differences between us. Or I want to tell a story how it's better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. I mean, it doesn't, I always think about it in the sense of a very broad, almost a cliche. I mean, just so that you kind of, not that you should write a cliche, but so that you have sort of boil it down to something, okay, the grass is greener. Like, I'm writing a story about the grass is greener. Okay, now what does that look like? Well, I'm going to show this. It's going to be about so-and-so, and they're going to da-da. I mean, it's that kind of thing.
It's a fascinating...
There isn't a right or wrong way to start. I mean, the way to start is just finding something that grabs you. Maybe it's a character. Maybe it's something you heard on the news. Maybe it's a story. Maybe it's a story you once heard 100 years ago. Or maybe it's something that you witnessed at a traffic stop. You can get, and once you kind of open yourself to it, there's inspiration around you everywhere.
You've got to get those creative juices flowing. You've got to be creative initially to come up with a nugget of a story that you can then expand upon, correct?
Well, yeah, I look at it this way. I think the most important thing is you have to have fun. No one's going to do anything if they're not having fun. So I start with what's interesting to me. And all of a sudden, like I'll be at a traffic light and I see something and I'll go, oh, okay, that's kind of interesting. What if? What if this? What if that? Because once you start playing what if, it begins to open you up. Oh, what if this? No, that. No, not that. But what is interesting in there is this other thing. So it's very kind of Socratic. You're really engaging with yourself at those two levels. What if? And and then what? So if you kind of tackle it I don't want to say even tackle, but if you approach it as a fun exercise rather than a daunting exercise, I think that you're going to be a lot more successful just within your own, within your own experience, even if that doesn't, result in a publishing deal. I mean, it has to start with you. If you're not happy doing it, nobody's going to be happy seeing it or reading it.
How does someone sign up for Storytelling Lab?
The best way to do it is to go to my website, which is storytellinglab.online, and book a consult with me. First place, you can see everything that I'm doing, the testimonials from people, the kind of work people are doing, so that you get to understand all the basics of the class. And then I like to do a 15-minute free consult with people because I feel like before I take anyone's money, I want to know that they understand what they're getting and that this is exactly what they want and that it's a good fit for the class.
Excellent.
Because it isn't something there isn't anything like it anywhere, either in schools or on the web. So because it's unlike anything else, I want people to be really clear that, and sign up for something that they really anticipate is going to really change their life, because I think it really is kind of a life-changing course because it sort of extends beyond just can you do one thing or another thing.
Well, congratulations on Storytelling Lab, and thank you very, very much, Bonnie, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Bonnie Garvin, creator of Storytelling Lab. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0808, and you'll find links to Bonnie's site. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder.
Giving you something to think about. This is Morning Shower Thoughts.
Have you ever noticed that theme parks can snap a crystal clear picture of you on a roller coaster at 70 miles per hour? But bank cameras can't get a clear shot of a bank robber standing still.
Morning Shower Thoughts from the Stuff File program.
Got something for the mailbag? Drop Peter a line. He'd love to hear from you. Send your email to mailbag@thestufffile.com. And remember, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H. That's mailbag@thestufffile.com. Or catch up with him on Twitter or Facebook. There's more Stuff File coming your way in just a few moments.
Michael Liebling is the author of The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a page-turning thriller. You say you've read other serial killer novels? Oh, as Michael will tell you, not like this one.
It's not like any serial killer novel you've read before. It really goes behind the scenes. So when I say he takes a wife, you've got to imagine what it's like to be the offspring of somebody who's murdered multiple people. So how do you live with yourself after that? And you were just a kid when it all happened. If you fall in love, how do you tell the woman you love your dad was a serial killer? And how would she react? So the title, it's not entirely clear, but as you get into it, it will become very clear.
The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. It's a recipe for mystery with a scoop of humor and a sprinkle of horror. The Serial Killer's Son Takes a Wife. Available now at Amazon and wherever you buy books.
You're listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder. It's way more fun and a lot healthier than licking all the buttons on an elevator.
And still to come on the program, we will talk to the author of Delicious Surrender. Plus, we also have an Idiot of the Day coming your way a little later on. And I've got one more Stuff File news story to share with you before we get to our first guest. And before we get to that, I just want to mention any of you listeners out there who would like to record an opening guest slate for the Stuff File program, drop me an email to peter@thestufffile.com with the subject line, Guest Slate, and we'll make it happen. Yeah, let's do that. Anyway, let's get back to the Stuff File news. The gullibility of people is something that knows no borders and can affect people worldwide. A woman from West Bengal has been accused of selling her husband's kidney and then using the money to run off with her lover. The woman reportedly convinced her spouse to put up his organ on the black market to pay for their daughter's education. She is then said to have taken the $11,500 for herself before eloping with someone she met on Facebook. Her husband reportedly attempted to confront her without success. Okay, so the question is, how dumb is the former husband, and what's the status of their daughter's future education? That's what I'd like to know. I was thinking of making this guy the idiot of the day, but I did not. But we do have an idiot of the day a little later on, and we'll get to that. However, let's get to our last guest on this edition of the Stuff File program. Luce Sutherland is the author of a juicy erotic romance novel called Delicious Surrender. It's her debut novel. Luce joins us via Zoom from Florida. Hi, Luce.
Hello, Peter. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for being on the program with us. Now, they always say, write what you know, and this is your debut novel. So what do you know about erotic romance?
I would say I've been a connoisseur of these types of books for multiple decades. Even before 50 Shades of Grey hit the scene, I was reading novels of this variety, discovered them in my late 20s, started out with simple vanilla stuff, and then found progressively juicy books throughout my younger years. It was only 5 years ago when I was presented with an opportunity to write my own, finish a book, because I had dabbled in writing for quite some time, but never finished. I let career and motherhood and all those things get in the way, but COVID gave me a perfect opportunity, a lot of isolation and time by myself to dive right in.
You say you got to this form of reading in your 20s. What led you to it in the first place? And is that early or late? I don't know.
I wasn't much of a reader, honestly. I ended a long-term relationship around that time, and I had some freedom. And I think I was hoping that romance was still alive after that experience. And so I think that's what led me to that section of the bookstore, to find romance because I had, a negative experience. So I'd say that was the impetus.
Tell us the story of Delicious Surrender.
Okay, happy to. It's a couple. They are a grumpy sunshine combo. That's how I describe it. It's a popular trope where the male protagonist is a little bit of, he's aloof, he is arrogant, he's dominant, and the female character is the opposite. She's pretty happy-go-lucky, she's pretty determined and stubborn. The beginning of the story is her getting rejected. Her novel, it is a spicy romance, and the agent says it's just lacking something. You need to go back to the drawing board and you need to make it spicier and then come back to me later. So in an effort to really dive in and get more real life experience, she gets a job at a club. She doesn't want to participate in club activities, but she wants to be able to see what's going on there. And that's where she runs into the owner, and they are a reluctant pair. He is highly suspicious. She thinks he's can we swear? Can we swear on your show?
No, you can't.
Okay, well, he's a bit of I can't think of a good word except the swear word. Anyway, he's arrogant, and that's where it all begins. Like I say, they have this instant attraction until he opens his mouth, and she thinks, well, he's just not nice, and I'll stay clear of him. But the attraction is there on both sides.
He's a euphemism for the male genitalia. Would that be accurate?
Yes. Yes, it would.
Okay.
Thank you, Peter. I was really at a loss. I'll have to come up with a good adjective. PG one.
Well, it's one of those situations, and you are a female writer, so I'll ask you this question particularly. Do you find that in a lot of romance novels and just generally, women seem to be attracted to the bad boy?
I'm afraid so. I don't speak for the entire population, but there is, especially in a book boyfriend. This is a new term that has just been invented in the last year or so, I think. What you're looking for is a man who, again, I preface that by, in your imaginary fantasy life, in a romance book, when you suspend reality, he's wealthy, he's handsome, he can take care of you, he can defend you, he can fight off the bad guys. That's what in a fantasy world, I think, attracts readers to this type of book. They're flying off the the shelves. The darker, the better, in fact. This is not a dark romance. That's an entirely different genre. But in those books, they're mafia, they're morally gray, they could be criminals. And yet, this is what people are reading.
Is the protagonist a woman, in this case, who always tries to not necessarily date the bad boy, but fix the bad boy or rescue the good within the bad boy?
Actually, no. She has trust issues. So she is reluctant she had a relationship and he was a nice guy and that did not work out. So she's given up hope of finding anybody who's a good match for her. And she would rather stick to a 3-date rule. This is where she is not interested in anything long term because she believes she'll just be disappointed. When she meets the male protagonist, that's her idea. He's not relationship material. That's absolutely fine. She doesn't try to fix them. She's given up on them.
As this is your first novel, was it easy? Was it difficult writing this romance, especially the erotic part? What was the issue?
It was fun, extremely challenging, never having really, I had to build it from the ground up. As I say, I had written before without an outline, without a roadmap, and that got me nowhere. I ended up writing myself into a corner. Plus, I was never willing to share it with anybody. At this point, I went back to square one. I started to study. I spent 2 months plus really learning the process and what went into the creation of this 3-act structure and everything else. And it took a year or more to develop story. And I immersed myself in everything and the research, the character development, all of that was enjoyable, but it was in fact challenging. And then once you've written it, you think, you breathe a sigh of relief. And then you have to go back and wear an editor's hat and rip it to shreds and figure out what's wrong, what flows poorly, what is a slow pace that needs to be fixed. And you do a lot of that on your own in the beginning, and then it is wise to hire a professional. So finding the right professional who will tell you your baby has issues and needs to be fixed. So it is a process. It took, actually 4 years. Here we are. 2025, and it has been an eye-opening experience, to say the least. The writing part first, and then the production, then the putting a book to market. That's a whole other ballgame.
I understand your motto is live life juicy. What exactly does that mean to you?
So to me, it means living authentically. It's speaking your truth. It's being at a stage where you care a little bit less, if not at all, about what other people think. You're at a point where you know what you want in your life and you go for it. Putting fear aside, putting, again, what people think of you aside. And that I had to do that in order to put this out. I've called it akin to walking down the street naked and saying, well, I created this book and I'm going to let people read it, which is huge. And I think that's the embodiment of Live Life Juicy. It really is just being yourself. And being happy with that, being content and finding your passion and going for it.
Well, you've read erotic romance novels since your youth. Yes. Now you've written one. Do you find that the whole prospect of this liberating for you?
Yes, it is actually liberating in that I've been talking about it and thinking about it for years and never had the guts to do it, to finish, put it in a book and put it on the market. So it is extremely liberating. I feel now that I'm on a runaway train. I boarded the train, I got my ticket, and now it's running at a high rate of speed. There's no jumping off, and here we go. I'm ready.
Delicious Surrender is coming out, but have you already thought about a follow-up?
Oh, absolutely. In fact, when I began writing it, I knew there would be multiple stories in the series. They're standalone novels. Happy Ever After is a guarantee. There are 3 male characters that went to university together, and each of them will get their own story. So this is the first, and I discuss these other characters a little bit in this first book. So yeah, a trilogy plus maybe a 4th. There's an interesting character in this first book that developed kind of by accident, and I think she should get her own story too. So I've got those percolating.
And the title, Delicious Surrender, what does that mean to you?
It means that the process of this romance, it should be delicious. It should be savored. And surrender, for me, it meant surrendering to trust, to be able to trust, to be able to come into a relationship and accept a person with their strengths and weaknesses, surrendering to, to love, ultimately.
Well, congratulations on the book. It's called Delicious Surrender. It's written by Luce Sutherland. And thank you very much, Luce, for taking the time to be on the program with us.
I truly appreciate it, Peter. Thanks for having me. Have a great day.
Luce Sutherland, author of the erotic romance novel Delicious Surrender. You can go to our website at thestufffile.com to the page for this show, which is show number 0808, and you'll find the links to Luce's site, plus links to either Amazon.com or Amazon.ca, where you can order her book directly. You're listening to the Stuff File program with me, Peter Anthony Holder. And boys and girls, it's that moment you've all been waiting for. It's time now for the Idiot of the Day.
And now it's time for the strange things adults do. The Stuff File presents the Idiot of the Day.
Polk County, Florida Sheriff's deputies were working the scene of a car crash when a man walked up and asked, "Yo, what the bleep happened?" The deputy said it was a car crash and everyone was okay. The man then stepped within a foot of the deputy and yelled, "No bleep! A car crash happened. Who hit who?" The deputy ordered the man to step back so first responders can work. At this point, the man hurled more obscenities his way, basically suggesting to the deputy that he could go and procreate with himself, yelling, "You can't tell me what to do!" The deputy repeated his order, move away or be arrested, and then came strike 4. That was when 23-year-old Sebastian Angel Suarez said, "I'm on an ankle monitor with a curfew. You can't do bleep. You can't take me anywhere." Suarez was found to be on probation for willful child abuse. He was arrested, charged with violating that probation, violation of the state's HALO law, and 2 counts of resisting arrest. By the way, the HALO law makes it illegal to be within 25 feet of a first responder with the intent to impede, threaten, or harass them. Now, why? Oh, why? If you're on probation and wearing an ankle monitor, would you get into the face of a police officer doing his job at the scene of an accident? One reason, and one reason only. You're an idiot!
Gee, I'm only a kid, but even I know you're an idiot.
And that's it for this edition of the Stuff File program, number 0808. Hope you enjoyed it. The website is thestufffile.com, and once again, stuff is spelled S-T-U-P-H, where you'll find information and links on all of our guests by going to the weekly Stuff File page. Just look for the corresponding program number, and once again, that's 0808. Email me at peter@thestufffile.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Spoutable, Mastodon, and Blue Sky as P.A. Holder. Check us out on patreon.com, where you can become a patron of the program. Hope to see you back here for our next show on the air, online, or as a download. We're coming to you from everywhere, including KDXRadio.com, over the air on World FM in New Zealand, WLSL-LP FM in Dade City, Florida, KZZH-LP FM in Eureka, California, CKUW FM in Winnipeg, CFMU in Hamilton, CKLU in Sudbury, Local 107.3 FM in St. John, CHSR in Fredericton, and also streaming on just about any streaming service your little heart desires. That's it. Bye-bye.
You've been listening to the Stuff File program with Peter Anthony Holder, a presentation of Flying Fish Communications. We leave you with this deep question to ponder. Who did we compare babies to before Winston Churchill?